So for the New Hampshire Notebook, NHNotebook.com, Jeremy Levier and Pete Terrier, we're here at JW Hills in Manchester, talking basketball, tournaments. Some of the tournaments already had championship games. Some of Division III and Division IV girls. Congratulations to Littleton in Division IV and White Mountains in Division III. Those teams have already won championships. Some teams, yesterday, we're still playing regular season games. So it's a crazy time of year, trying to keep track of everything. But for now, we're going to be talking about the Division I boys tournament. And tournament gets started on Tuesday night. You have a lot of interesting matchups in the way the tiebreakers have kind of a lot of ties in Division I. So we think we know what the seedings are going to be and what the pairings are going to be. So Pete, before we get started in breaking down the matchups, thoughts on the tournament and the season that we've had so far in Division I? It's been a wild ride. Trinity's been up there all season long, but there's been a lot of great games in Division I so far this year.
I'm very excited. I mean, I get excited every time March Madness and really started in the month of December. You had great games. You had a lot of teams kind of jockeying back and forth, some surprise teams in there. Salem, I think, is one in particular. You had big injuries. I mean, Dimitri Flores missing half the season because of a broken arm, and then tweaks his ankle in the second to last game of the regular season, misses the regular season finale. So many different, Alvern riding high, Pinkerton riding high to start, both of those teams kind of swooning a little bit, Pinkerton riding the ship at the end, and somehow, you wake up this morning or whenever the NHIAA actually releases those standings, you see Pinkerton's a 5 seed. To me, that's a big shocker. So it has been a great season, and I think it's going to be a tremendous tournament. It always is. I like to see surprises and upsets, but I don't necessarily see that this year. We'll get into the different pairings and the matchups, but I see a chalk type of tournament. I think the higher seeded teams are going to prevail. We'll find out on Tuesday night, I guess.
I feel like, I agree. You got a kind of top heavy, but that top tier is deep. Usually, if you talk about top heavy, it's not going to be a lot of upsets. Probably you talk about 3 or 4, maybe 5 teams that have a shot at, getting to UNH winning a championship. I feel like right now you have 7 teams that all have a shot, and they are the top 7 seeds. Trinity, obviously, they're the number 1 seed. They only lost 2 games. They're 2 games up on everybody else. They're the number 1 seed. Then you go down to Salem, Nashua North. Both were tied for that number 2 seed. Salem has the tiebreaker. They're going to be the number 2 seed. Nashua North the number 3. Manchester Central, they're tied with Pinkerton and Spalding, all at 13 and 5. Looks like it's going to be Central, then Pinkerton, then Spalding, 4, 5, and 6, and then Merrimack at number 7. Talk about a dangerous number 7 seed, and Merrimack going 12 and 6. Obviously, their record probably would have been better if they didn't have the injuries that they did. Sure. Jackson King out for the year. Jared Peabody's been out. Dimitri Flores has been out, like you mentioned, Pete. But if that team is healthy, they're as good as anybody in the state. Then you got some teams that have been kind of up and down. When you look at Alvern, Nashua South, Bishop Gert, and Manchester West, earlier on in the season, if we were doing this in December, early on in January, those 4 teams might be talking about getting to UNH, but they've kind of struggled a little bit as the season has gone on. So I think those top 7 teams, ending with Spalding, Pinkerton, Merrimack, any of those 7 teams has a shot at winning the championship.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I would pretty much cut it off there at number 7. Earlier this year, I might have said Alvern. They're in the 8th position right now. I just don't like the way they've been playing down the stretch. I mean, remember when Manchester West was everybody's darling, too? Oh, yeah. We forgot about that. Now no one gives them a chance. I mean, they lost Joe Bureau, so obviously that's big. They've kind of fallen apart down the stretch. Spalding is a team that is always a sleeper. They always have the ability to get to UNH. And even out of the 6th position here, I think they're going to have a tough time if they do have to go on the road, if they win their first game. I think they're going to have a tough time going into Nashua North and winning with the way that team is playing. And speaking of Nashua North, say Ryan Gauthier is not suspended. Him and Farmer suspended for 4 games in the end of December, early January.
They might be the number 1 seed.
They might be the number 1 seed, although I was at the game, and I think you were too, when they played Trinity early in the season. I think it was like the 2nd game of the season. and they got absolutely destroyed. It was a close game in the first quarter, and I think they ended up losing by 40 points, and they weren't even in the ball game. They didn't even look like they belonged in the same gym. This is a much different National North team right now.
They've gotten a lot better as the season's gone on.
You're right, but if they don't have that suspension there, just like some of these other injuries, and these players don't miss the games, I think that they could be in a little bit different position right now. So, yeah, it is up in the air, but legitimately, I think there's 7 teams that could potentially win it, and I'm not even sure that Spalding can win the championship, but I think just about everybody else, maybe not Pinkerton, sorry Pete Rosinski, sorry Tim Cronin, all those guys, I just don't believe that your teams can win the championship. I don't think that's anything wrong with that, me saying that, it's just my personal opinion.
Spalding, hey, they in the span of 1 week, they beat Merrimack and they beat Manchester Central.
I agree.
In the span of 1 week, so I think they're a dangerous team. But when I saw them play against Trinity a couple weeks ago, they didn't really seem to be at that level. Where in the span of the last 3 weeks, Trinity on Friday night games, they've been kind of the featured game. In the last 3 Friday nights, they played Pinkerton, they played Salem, and they played Spalding. The Salem game, that game went down to the wire. It was clearly two evenly matched teams. Salem and Trinity were right there with each other, neck and neck. The Spalding game, Spalding seemed not really at that level as Trinity was. And then obviously the Trinity-Pinkerton game, Pinkerton beat them.
Sure.
And they went on a 15-0 run in the second half, playing some great basketball. So Pinkerton is, I think, right there with anybody else in Division I right now. Looking at outside those 7 teams, if there's a team that might be able to pull an upset, or at least maybe shock somebody, I don't know about you, Pete, but a team that's been kind of hot and cold, Manchester Memorial.
I was going to say that.
You look at what they've been doing, and it's just weird. You don't really know what to expect from this team. Late in the season, they lost to Exeter, they lost to Londonderry, but at the same time, they took Trinity to overtime. They beat Manchester Central.
Yep.
Who else did they beat? I think Memorial. They beat Spalding, or they beat National. They also beat National North. I was at that game. So they've beaten some really good teams, but they've also lost to some of the teams lower down on the totem pole. Not really sure what to expect from them. They're a team that shoots a lot of threes. They're a young team, inexperienced, so they kind of have their ups and downs, but they're a team that I think is capable of an upset.
No, I agree with you 100%. I don't think that they're going to be playing Pinkerton in the first round the way it looks. And
I think that's going to be a great game.
I think
that has the potential to be the best first-round game in Division I.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's not the one that I got to decide which game I'm going to go to on Tuesday. I'm sure you're in the same situation. You're looking at the brackets and seeing what the pairings are, and it is difficult. At first glance, I was looking at that Merrimack Bishop Girton game because of the rivalry, because of the game that just took place earlier last week. That was a real close battle, and I still think BG has the ability to come out and play a real good game of basketball. I don't know if they can do it 4 times and defend their championship, but I think they could step up and give Merrimack a real good game. So I think that might be the game that I go to, even though they kind of got destroyed the other night by Salem at BG on senior night. I still think that there might be a little life in them, and maybe they can come up, and they've got enough good players. I think they can get it done. The Pinkerton Memorial game is interesting. Obviously, an 8-9 game between Alvern and National South is interesting.
2 teams that have underachieved a little bit late in the season, though. I think that game could be interesting. I think even though Alvern's at home, during the regular season, National South blew them out. They beat them by 30 points.
Head scratcher.
That was a crazy. I think everybody in the state was surprised to see that final score.
Yeah, look, I think that Alvern, has all the pieces. I think they got a real solid starting 5. Maybe go 6 guys deep, but they don't have much of a bench whatsoever. I think National South actually has more guys in the rotation that they can play. Muccioli, he's been relatively quiet. I don't know if he's hurt or if he's missed games or whatever.
He missed a couple games during the middle of the season with an injury,
He's been relatively quiet, but he has the ability to really step up and carry a team. Jack Preston had another big game the other night. I think he had like 24. He's had a couple of 20-plus point games. He's got some size. They got a bunch of different guys with some size. Tim Preston's been a pretty good point guard this year. I like them, but I still like Alvern in that game. But I think either one of those knows who wins that game is not going to beat Trinity. I still think Trinity is the team to beat, but they are also young. I mean, their best players, in my opinion, are Carmen Gianpetrucci and Pat Keefe. I think everybody talks about the big guys, and Mabor Gabriel has had a decent year, but not a great year. Lauderdale's pretty decent. He's got so much size. Aluko obviously has the size. You know, they got a bunch of different role players. But I think Trinity is definitely the team to beat, but can they put it all together? I think they can definitely be beat by a veteran team like a Merrimack. I think they could be beat by a Salem. I think they can... I don't know that North can beat them because they just got blown out so bad when they did play them. Maybe psychologically they might not be ready for that challenge, but it won't happen until they get to UNH. I think once you get to UNH on that big floor with that atmosphere, things kind of change. Your mindset changes. You might tighten up a little bit. So I think anything can happen once it gets down to the Final Four. I just think the hard part is obviously getting there, especially if you're a lower seed.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you get to UNH, you know, two big keys. The game really changes on that bigger court. Or actually three keys that I look at when trying to separate teams at UNH as opposed to, you know, any other gym, you know, a regular high school gym. One of them is experience in that atmosphere. You know, because the more players that you have that have experience playing in that atmosphere, playing in semifinal or playing in championship games, you can't really prepare for that unless you've already had that experience. You know, so Trinity and Central, the only two teams coming, you know, that in that top 7. You know, last year's semifinals, it was Trinity, Central, BG, and Alvern. You know, those 4 teams have an advantage because they've been there before if they can make it to UNH. The other thing is, with the backdrop and in that bigger gym that UNH has, with the basket and, you know, it's such a huge gym, I think if you're a team that really relies on the three-point shot, do you have less of a chance to win. If you got a team that's got a good inside game, you work the ball around, you get shots inside, you don't rely so much on outside shots, that bodes better for you. Salem, they rely so much on that outside shot of Ben Slepian. If they get to UNH, I think it might be a tough game for them. Just because, you know, if you're a shooting team, that gym is not easy to shoot in. Where, you know, if you're a team that runs, gets layups, it helps you out. And with that the bigger gym, if you can spread your team out, spread a defense out, move the ball around. If you got kids that can go off the dribble penetrate, kick it back out, and also run the fast break. If you're a transition team with good speed, that helps you guys out as well.
Well, you're talking about experience, and let's take those 3 teams you mentioned. Trinity, Central, and Alvern, okay? To me...
And BG was the other team that went to the semis.
Yep, okay, in the top, okay. And BG, the other team that was in the semifinals. BG has had a lot of turnover, obviously, so they don't have a lot of guys. I mean, McCarthy, Kesty, they had some experience there. Pollard, did he play any minutes really on that big floor? Not really. He wasn't a factor on that team. McCarthy was a role player on that team. Kesty was probably a guy who had the most experience on that team. No one else really.
I mean, it was mainly the seniors that were out there. You know, yeah.
Central. All right. Well, John Wickey's gone. You know, you had Junior Brown, and you had McCown. But
Pelletier got some good minutes.
Yeah, a few minutes.
He got some decent minutes on there.
He was a guy that last year came on towards the end. He's obviously a key guy for them this year, but I'm not going to say he's an experienced guy in that situation. You look at Trinity. They don't. Mabor Gabriel, Lauderdale to a certain extent, a little bit of Luco. Maybe
all those guys got Hamill, Gianpetrucci. Those guys all got big minutes last year.
He did, okay, but that was kind of a surprise. He wasn't really a guy that got a ton of minutes last year, but he stepped up in a big spot in that championship game and hit some big shots. So, but those aren't guys that were like playing, you know, starters minutes last year. Only a couple people on each of those teams. You look at Alvern. I mean, you got Livingston, who played a lot last year. You got Thomas Wick, who played a lot last year. Bolio, who played a lot last year. They might be the most experienced team
if they can make it. If they can make it to UNH, I don't know if they will.
If they can make it, but I'm just talking about the teams that were there last year, because no one else has that experience.
Oh yeah.
So if they can make it, those are the teams that have the most experience. It might be Alvern.
We'll see. I mean, like you said, you know, not very likely that they'll get past Trinity in the quarterfinals. And just running down the rest of the field, first round matchups, we mentioned Trinity, Salem, North, Central, Pinkerton, Spalding, Merrimack in the 7th spot, 8-9 game, Alvern hosting Natural South, BG in the 10 spot. They're going to go to Merrimack. 11 seed is Manchester West. They're going to play at Spalding. 12 seed is Manchester Memorial. They're going to play at Pinkerton in the 12-5 game. Winnicott comes in at number 13. They're going to go to Manchester Central. Rounding it out, Londonderry, Dover, and Exeter, 14, 15, and 16. So you're going to have Londonderry. A lot of people are saying that, you know, they might be a sleeper team, better than their record indicates. They're going to play at Nashua North in the first round. Dover goes to Salem. Exeter goes to Trinity. Rounding out the field in the first round games. So we talk about some of the first round games. Looking at the quarterfinal games, you got the possibility for some really good quarterfinal action. I know we both seem to think that, you know, whoever wins that Alvirne South game, Trinity's going to move past them and Trinity's going to advance to the semifinals. But those other three quarterfinal games, if the top seeds hold true, you know, you have the possibility to have Salem against Merrimack. Yeah. You got Central against Pinkerton, and you got North against Spalding. Those would be three unbelievable quarterfinal games. All three of them, the caliber of games they could be would be more like semifinal games than quarterfinal games. It'll be great.
I mean, I think the Trinity, like you said, that's the one game that, you know, Trinity should win rather handily. Salem Merrimack could be a war, a dogfight. You know, North Spalding, I give the edge to North because it's at home, and I think they would be able to handle Spalding in that game. I'm not saying easily, but I would expect them to win by a decent margin. If it was at Spalding, on the other hand, then that's a great ball game there. That's a must-watch game. But I think it's different, Spalding having to come to Nashua. You look at that Central Pinkerton, I don't know, I'm not anti-Pinkerton. I saw those teams play a couple of weeks ago. It was at Central. Patricus didn't play in that game, and they're a different team with him in there because he gives them the size, the rebounding, the defense, and a guy who can score a little bit down low. Central really doesn't have a lot of size, although they play a lot bigger. I mean, they've 1 through 5. They actually go like 7 or 8 deep. You got Stillwell playing some minutes now. Isaiah Joseph playing some minutes. It gives Doc Wheeler the bench that he did not have last year with that team. And, you know, LeCount, Junior Brown. They get the kid Plentis coming up, backing up the point guard Dawson Dixon off the bench. He's been playing some minutes. I think that's a good team. Christian Artiga is one of the better big men around. He's undersized at 6'3", but because he shoots with the left hand, he's got some good moves, and he can step out and hit the three. I think he's going to cause some people some problems too.
Oh yeah, so I mean, you got some really athletic big guys, you know, with Artiga and Junior Brown in there. Sure. I mean, Junior Brown can defend, you know, anybody inside or outside. I think that'll be a great quarterfinal game, you know, with Central and Pinkerton. Pinkerton, obviously a team that I got a chance to see on Friday night when they played against Trinity. I was pretty impressed. They're not as deep as Central, no question, because Pinkerton really, they live and die by their starting five. Scott Bradley and freshman Luke Testa, they get a little bit of minutes coming off the bench, but they're really all about their starting five. Sean Smith, Kevin Colbert, Chris Light, Alex Patricus, and Cam Welch. These 5 guys, when they're all healthy, they can play with anybody, and they really play off each other well. They get good team chemistry. They can score inside and outside. They go to the basket. They don't really rely so much on the three-pointer, you know, which, like I said, you get to UNH and you have good inside game. You go to the basket, you slash the rim. You don't rely on as much on the outside shot. That helps you out. Can they get there, though? I think that'll be, like I said, that'll be a great game if they play against Manchester Central. And talking to Coach Rosinski after that Trinity game, first thing he asked me was, he was like, what was the score? What was the score in that Central Merrimack game? He really wanted to know because he knew that if Merrimack won, then he would get the number 4 seed. And if he played Central, he would get it at home. But since Central won, now Central is going to be the number 4 seed, and that possible game will be at Central. I don't know about you, Pete, but for me, I really don't think, especially in Division I, because the schools are so close together, except for Keene, that's way out, 2 hours away. They're not in the playoffs anyway.
Fortunately, they didn't make it, so.
Yeah, but the way I feel for the other teams, I don't think there's really that much of a home court advantage. I mean, I think Trinity has a pretty good home court advantage because, you know, that gym, such a small gym with their big guys, they can really clog up the court and make it really difficult to score on them. And they got a really good student section as well that makes for a great atmosphere. But I don't think that most teams really have that much of a home court advantage.
I disagree with you. I think home court is huge, especially at the high school basketball level. I think in football it's a little bit different. I don't think there's so much of a home field advantage. You know, sometimes you're going to go into a football field, you'll be intimidated to play at Pinkerton or whatever. But I think in basketball there is a home court advantage, and you know it's the crowd, it's the comfort, the confines, you know, like you mentioned with Trinity. But I think there is a big time. I mean, I mentioned that with Spalding.
We're talking about Pinkerton and Central though. Does those teams really have that much of a like? If that game is at Central or if it's at Pinkerton, I really don't think it makes that much of a difference.
I think Central,
it's whichever team comes to play and executes better that night is going to win that game.
Obviously, but I think Central, if you're taking that game in particular, I think Central has a bigger advantage at being at Simon Gym in Manchester than Pinkerton would have if it was at Hackler Gym in Derry. Hackler Gym is a weird place, though. It's such a big place.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about the background and stuff like that at UNH, the backdrop. I think that is different. I just don't think the crowd at Pinkerton, because it's so big. You know,
you get some fans that are a mile away. If you stayed up in the top of the bleachers at Pinkerton, you're a mile away from the game. Right. You know, you're cheering.
And
no one could really hear you.
Just on one side, too.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's a little bit different. But I think Central is a tougher place to play than Pinkerton is, my opinion.
Well, Pinkerton showed,
Pinkerton bashing continues.
They showed in that Trinity game. They went on the road to Trinity. I know that Trinity already had the #1 seed locked up in that game, but they were playing to win. There's no question about it.
I think
they're playing to win, and Pinkerton went on the road to a hostile environment and got a win. They showed they could do it.
I think they're good. Look, Chris Light is one of the best players in the state. I don't think a lot of people talk about him. I don't think he gets a lot of consideration in terms of all. You know, I think he's all-state, one of the leading scorers, but he's done it really quietly. You know, everybody's talking about Ben Slepian and Ryan Gauthier and those guys in the years that they've had, but not a lot of people are talking about Chris Light, and he's just a solid player. He just gets it done quietly, workmanlike. He reminds me a little bit of Steven Savage. I'm trying to think of a kid whose game is similar, and a few years ago that kid from Salem, Savage, who ended up winning a championship with Salem. He hit the game-winning shot. Similar game. You know, he's got that medium range game. He's got that outside, you know, the arc game, and he can go to the basket. And about the same height, although Light is a little bit bigger. I think Light is
6'3", 6'4", yeah.
So I like him a lot. I just don't know that they have enough around him. I mean, Petrikis obviously needs to be healthy. And that kid Cam Welch has really come on.
Yeah, he's come on.
Started to score, hit the threes. But Colbert is pretty good, but I think he's an undersized guard. Same thing with Sean Smith. I think that some of the bigger guards in Central, you know, not counting Dawson Dixon, Central has some bigger players that I think could cause them some problems in the quarterfinals.
So that'll be a great game. And any upsets you see happen in the first round? I mean, we talk about, you know, Memorial being a team that could pull an upset. I mean, you see anybody 10 seed down, I mean, pulling off an upset in that first round.
Well, I mean, I mentioned the BG thing with Merrimack, but I can't imagine Merrimack's going to lose at home, you know, to a lower seeded team for the third straight year in the Dimitri Flores era, especially with the way Tyler Gendron's playing.
The Gendron brothers, there, you know, if Dimitri's healthy, I can't see them losing.
You know, Gianelli has started to play, and he's a force. So, and he had a good game against Bishop Gurdon. You know, maybe BG if they can pull it all together, but they've had obviously problems, you know, with that team. You know, the chemistry-wise with that team just hasn't been right this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, looking at these lower seeds, I just don't see it happening. I think, you know, BG's been struggling. Manchester West is just, like you said, they've fallen apart as the season has gone on. How is that team going to beat, you know, a very well-coached, disciplined Spalding team at Spalding?
It's not
you know, when those teams played each other a couple weeks ago, Spalding ran them out of the gym.
Yeah,
that's not happening. Winnicott, Londonderry, Dover, Exeter. I mean, I just don't see.
Call me crazy,
you know,
but I'm looking at that Dover Salem thing, and I'm saying, you know, Dover's got some pretty good players. You know, LeBlanc's a good player. You know, he's got some height, obviously. Salem doesn't have any height. You know, I don't know. You know, for some reason I'm thinking that. And then you look at that 16-1. Remember a few years ago, David Medall was still on Trinity.
Yep.
I think that was a 14-3 game.
It was a 3-14, and they beat him.
And Exeter beat them. You know, and no one ever would have thought that.
If Matt Barr gets hot, you know,
that was a better Trinity team, I think, than this Trinity team.
Probably.
Was it? I don't know.
Oh yeah. Well, this year's Trinity team doesn't have anybody like David Medall.
Right.
You know, they had Dave Medall. They had Zach Stevens shooting the ball. Well, Zach Stevens was out for that game, but that was a good team. And that brings up a point that, you know, I think across the divisions, you know, things are a little bit down. You know, talent-wise, you know, the teams might not be a little bit down this year as opposed to last year.
And you know what? That doesn't bother me. I mean, there's ebbs and flows. I mean, there's great senior classes that graduate. You know, you look at the sophomores and freshmen, and juniors that are playing very well and big parts of their team. So to me, I don't yeah, you can say it's down. It's not the same as it was. Not as many great players. But
a lot of kids are going prep now.
You're right. That's true.
Takes an impact.
That's true. But you know what? I just don't worry about that too much.
Yeah.
I just take it the here and now, and I'm very excited about the season we've had, and I'm really looking forward to the postseason ahead.
So Final Four predictions. I think we both are in agreement that Trinity is one of those teams, and I'll just say my Final Four, and you can say yours. I see Salem and Merrimack in that quarterfinal game. I got Merrimack moving on.
Ooh.
I think it's gonna be a great game. I think it's gonna be a great game, but I got Merrimack going on the road, moving on. North and Spalding. I think we're in agreement. I think North is gonna win that game. They got speed if they can play on their home court. I don't think, like I said, home, especially at North. I was at North versus Memorial at North. There was like nobody there, and
because it wasn't against a Nashua team.
Oh yeah.
That's in a regular season game in Nashua.
Yeah,
you're not going to get
playoffs is going to be different. I'm sure if they play Spalding in a playoff game, in the quarterfinal playoff game, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be a great atmosphere. But so I got North moving on, Central and Pinkerton. I think we're going to be in disagreement on this. I got Pinkerton moving on.
All right, that's where we're
probably going to be disagreeing. So my Final Four is Trinity, Merrimack, Nashua North, and Pinkerton.
Right.
Yours?
I got Trinity, and I've got Merrimack beating Salem as well. I think the size is the difference in that game. Tyler Jenren, Gianelli.
It was a difference in the regular season game. We were both there at that regular season game.
Yes.
Even without Dimitri in there, Merrimack still beat Salem by about 15 points.
Yeah, I forgot about that actually, so that's a good point. I just like Merrimack in that game, and I like Central. So I got North, Trinity, Central, and Merrimack in the Final Four.
So Final Four then, I got semifinals North against Merrimack. Oof, that would be a great game.
That's a heck of a game.
That's a heck of a game. And then you have Trinity against Pinkerton, rematch of a game that just happened on Friday night. I think North and Merrimack, I like Merrimack moving on. They got the guards, they got the size. I think it's going to be a Trinity-Merrimack final. Trinity-Merrimack, early on in the season, they were the two favorites. And then I have Trinity winning it. Like we talked about, the experience, they have more guys that have experience on that UNH court. They got the size. They have shooters as well. That's who I got. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think obviously Trinity is a team that Central beat them though. If they're playing Central in that game, we've got Trinity playing different teams in the Final Four. But,
so for you, it'd be Trinity and Central in one semi.
Yeah, and North and Merrimack in the other. And man, talk about putting me on the spot here. I have fallen in love with Nashua North, and I've fallen in love with the way Ryan Gauthier is playing. And I know a lot of people aren't necessarily on that Gauthier bandwagon because of the disciplinary issues with him over the last couple of years. But it really seems like he's matured, and I really like that North team a lot. But I like that Merrimack team a lot too.
What a great game that's going to be.
I mean, tremendous game. So, do I have to pick one?
You don't have to. I mean,
because to be honest with you, I don't know. I can't say.
Maybe we'll have another show previewing the Final Four.
Show. Yeah, let's do another show.
We might have another show previewing the Final Four. But those are our Final Four picks.
Beating Central, and then I'm going to say Nashua North over Merrimack, and then man. I just think that North.
I think North on that, if they get to UNH, I know they don't have the experience there, but with their speed, the way they can spread you out and drive and kick and run the fast break, they could be very dangerous on a bigger court.
They're not deep though. That's the thing that scares me about North. They have a couple of guys off the bench, but once they're
Merrimack's a deeper team.
Merrimack's deeper.
Deep,
I think Trinity's the deepest.
Yeah, well, they got 7. They got a solid 7-player rotation, and all 7 of those players could play starter minutes for sure.
I mean, so if I had to pick one right now, I would say Trinity, but I would not be shocked if they lost. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, Central is also a dangerous team. I think, like I said, that Central Pinkerton game is going to be a great quarterfinal game. I think that, like I said, it's going to be caliber of a semifinal game. Player of the year, we talked about a couple different guys. My opinion. I think everybody in the state knows my opinion. Don't do any voting on All-State or Player of the Year until after the championship game is done. a couple of years ago, there's examples that go back. When David Medall won Player of the Year a couple of years ago, his team got bounced in the first round of the playoffs. And it ended up that was the year Pinkerton won it. And Zach Matthew, at the end of the tournament, everybody knew Zach Matthew should have been the Player of the Year.
Obviously.
But, oh, no, they already did the voting. They already voted for Dave Medall, even though, you know what I mean? And that same year, Division II, Jake Woodward from Lebanon, he won Player of the Year, even though his team lost the first round to Bedford. Then it turned out, Milford won the championship. Mike O'Loughlin had a huge tournament. He should have been Player of the Year. So what usually happens is, at the end of the regular season, you'll have 3 or 4, maybe even 5 players that are all pretty close, that are all candidates for Player of the Year, and then at the end of the tournament you have 1, maybe 2 that emerge as, okay, this is the guy that everybody knows at that point should be Player of the Year. So why not just wait until then to do the voting?
Well, I hear you, and I think that's the way it should be, but I don't think you shouldn't discuss it. There's so many different people have different Players of the Year. Different organizations, different media outlets do Players of the Year. When I was at WGAM, we had our Mr. Basketball. You voted on that. We waited till the end of the year to do the votes, but he took into consideration the regular season. He took into consideration the postseason, because to me the postseason means a lot more.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's
the most important part of the season.
And if your team doesn't get there to the postseason, well, if you had a huge year. But look, I think that you look at this, 2 of the main candidates, the leading candidates in my opinion, Gauthier and Slepian, they could play each other in the semifinals. Whoever wins that game, whoever has the better game, say one team blows out the other, that player is going to move ahead in the voting, I think. So I think it's great discussion. There's not an odds-on favorite this year, and I like it. I like it that way.
Yeah, some other candidates, you mentioned Gauthier and Slepian. I think some other candidates for Player of the Year. We also talk about Chris Light. Tyler Gendron had a big year over at Merrimack. Dominic Parody for Salem. For National South, Anthony Muccioli, although he's missed some games.
He doesn't belong. He doesn't,
Aaron Martin from Manchester West has had a big year, although that team has struggled as the season has gone on.
He's had a big year too, but to me, you got to have an upper echelon team and be the star player on an upper echelon team.
I don't know if a Central player would win Player of the Year.
No,
LeCount, on any given night, you have 3 or 4 different guys that might be their best player, whether it's LeCount or Artiga or Pelletier.
Right. Look at the Boston Bruins last year.
I don't even know if Central or Trinity. You might see neither of those teams even have a first-team All-Stater. Because both those teams have 3, 4, maybe even 5 guys where each night could be a different guy. They don't really have that one star player.
Sure.
But it could be Trinity and Central could end up going to the semifinals.
I agree, and I mentioned the Bruins thing from last year. I mean, everybody, you could say Tim Thomas, was their MVP, but that was mostly during the playoffs. They just had a bunch of different guys that were doing the job, and that's what it takes to win a championship.
So that's our Division I basketball tournament preview. We might have another show. Maybe we'll have another show previewing the semifinals in the Final Four over at UNH. We get so much discussion here. I think it's boiling over to a possible another show here at GW Hills. Pete Terrier, Jeremy Levier. Pete, real quick, you want to plug your show?
Yeah, I mean, some radio shows end at the end of the regular season. We keep it going. We're going right through the month of March with the New Hampshire High School Sports Show. Myself, it's on WGIR, AM 610 in the Manchester area. If you're watching on the Seacoast, 96.7 FM, The Wave. Mark Thaler from Union Leader, my co-host. Dave Haley, our friend, has been coming on the show regularly, talking to coaches, talking to players. We're going to be bringing you every Saturday morning between 7 and 9, the best high school coverage around on the radio.
So that's Pete's show, and of course, check out the New Hampshire Notebook, nhnotebook.com. You're watching this, you're already on the NH Notebook. So thanks for watching, and for Pete Terry, I'm Jeremy Levier. That's our Division I preview, and thanks for watching.